why make the people poorer and angrier if you're going to annex this territory? I don't understand the logic there.
If you listen to people like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, then, the two right-wing ministers, they make very clear that they want the population out unless they utterly submit to Israeli diktat. And anybody who resists Israeli governance or orders in the future would be marked for deportation.
So the details of the 14-point agreement between Iran and the United States have begun to leak out. And wow, we're going to go through them a little bit today because I think that it really shows the point of what I was saying yesterday is that the U.S. lost the war. And this agreement, if it's anything close to what is going to be the final agreement that's going to be signed on Friday, is exactly what I said before. It's a kind of a capitulation. It's a pretty good deal for Iran. I'm Borzu Dergahi. This is my podcast. It's called Badlands, and you can subscribe at borzu.substack.com. I'm also on YouTube. It would be great if I can get some more subscribers on YouTube because there's a way of monetizing YouTube, but I need like 500 subscribers in order to start doing that. I'm also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Today, I have a pretty good show. Later on in this show, I have an interview with Joost Hilterman. Now, he's an old friend of mine as well as the longtime Middle East guy at the Crisis Group, the International Crisis Group. That is a think tank and research and advocacy organization that focuses on resolving and finding solutions for armed conflicts and conflict situations, also preventing conflicts before they happen. And we talk about his new report about the economy of the West Bank and how it's being strangled. Now, I got to apologize. There were some technical problems during this interview. He was on I don't know if it was my end or his end. He was in Italy working off of a 5G, and my internet has been problematic in the past few weeks. So I think that there was just technical difficulties, and I apologize for some of the distractions, if any, during that interview. But I think it's a very interesting interview. In addition, I have an interview later on in this broadcast with NewsX in which I describe, to the best of my understanding, what this new memorandum of understanding is about and what it does and does not contain. But since that interview, I got a hold of something that looks like it very well could be the memorandum of understanding, at least a version of it. It sounds a lot like it. Now, there have been versions of this memorandum floating around. The Iranians made a reference to it. U.S. officials had described it as a 1.5-page document. The version that I saw was distributed by a think tank guy named Josh Block, and I think it's pretty credible. And why do I think it's pretty credible? It's because a lot of people who are the right kind of people, i.e. like warmongering, pro-war, Israel first kind of shills, are really upset about it. And it's, more importantly, some of the details appear to have been confirmed by J.D. Vance, and it's about 1.5 pages, as was described. And I apologize, I'm going to have to put my glasses on in order to read some of this. But basically, there's 14 points to this memo, and the first point is that the Islamic Republic of Iran and the U.S., together with the allies in the current war, and that means basically Hezbollah and undertake to end immediate and permanent end to the war on all fronts, including Lebanon, again, a reference to Lebanon. Iran and the U.S. undertake to respect each other's sovereignty and territorial la-di-da-di-da, i.e. basically the same kind of language that was in the Algiers Accords in 1981 when the U.S. and Iran ended their hostilities over the hostage crisis, and America immediately set upon to violate those terms. So I don't have a lot of faith in that, and I'm sure the Islamic Republic of Iran doesn't here. They negotiate for 60 days, maximum of 60 days, extendable by mutual consent. There is basically, this is super important, immediately upon the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding, the U.S. will lift the naval blockade and restore traffic with a maximum of 30 days to its full capacity. Traffic of ships shall be proportional to the pre-war volume. The United States also undertakes to withdraw its forces from the surrounding areas within 30 days. Whoa, what does that mean? Withdraw forces from all of its former bases in the 30 days or from the Gulf of Oman and the Strait of Hormuz area? Not clear about that, and I'm sure that's going to be a sticking point. The other point is that the Iranians will immediately take steps to ensure that the movement of merchant ships from the Persian Gulf to the Sea of Oman and vice versa is resumed within 30 days to the pre-war volume. And this is basically removing the mines and technical obstacles. The U.S., and then here is like, wow, the U.S. undertakes, together with its regional partners, to create a comprehensive plan agreed upon by both parties for the rehabilitation and economic development of the Islamic Republic of Iran while ensuring financing of at least $300 billion. The implementation of this plan as part of the final agreement will be formulated within 60 days. So basically within 60 days, they're going to have a plan for putting this plan into effect. The U.S. commits to, as agreed upon, remove all types of sanctions currently facing the Islamic Republic of Iran, including resolutions of the United Nations Security Council, et cetera, and all unilateral U.S. sanctions, both primary and secondary. Meanwhile, the Islamic Republic of Iran reiterates that it will never produce nuclear weapons. Iran and the U.S. have agreed that the fate, and listen to this is key language, the Islamic Republic of Iran and the U.S. have agreed that the fate of enriched material and the fate of all other mutually agreed nuclear-related issues will be adequately addressed in a final agreement. Are they going to be able to come up with this in 60 days? Are they going to be able to resolve the nuclear issues in 60 days? I seriously doubt it, but as the provisions of this agreement say, that 60 days is extendable upon mutual satisfaction. Iran and the U.S. agree that Iran will maintain the status quo on its nuclear program. It won't advance anything, and the U.S. won't add any sanctions with regard to the nuclear program. And the U.S. undertakes that immediately after the signing of the memorandum, the U.S. Treasury, this is so key, this is the most important part. So number 10 is the most important part, I think. The U.S. undertakes that immediately after the signing of this memorandum of understanding, that is on Friday, until the date of the lifting of sanctions, U.S. Treasury Department will issue waivers for exports of Iranian oil, petrochemicals, and derivatives, and all related services, including banking, insurance, transport, and the like. So basically what they're saying is that, like, U.S. wants the price of oil to go down. They don't care how it's done. And this is what I was saying. It's like basically Donald Trump has to decide between his political financiers and his oil buddies and the oligarchs that are in his circle. And he chose the oligarchs because what this is going to do is going to bring down the price of oil worldwide and in the U.S., and this is going to give the U.S. economy a boost, and that's really what Donald Trump cares about, and it'll probably give his fellow Republicans a little boost in the upcoming midterms, but probably not enough. Number 11, the U.S. undertakes that in light of progress of negotiations towards a final agreement, frozen or restricted funds and assets of the Islamic Republic will be released and made fully available. These are monies that Iran holds in various accounts around the world that have been frozen because of U.S. efforts, U.S. restrictions on those monies, and they're estimated to be up to $120 billion. So I think that is an important part too. This is what they talk about, the $12 billion or so and $24 billion. Some of it may have already been released. As far as we know, there's rumors that some of it has been released through the United Arab Emirates and through Qatar. U.S. and Iran agree that an implementation mechanism will be established to oversee successful implementation. This is just pro forma language. Following the signing of the memorandum of understanding upon receipt of assurances regarding the commencement, etc., the Islamic Republic and the U.S. will enter negotiations for a final agreement with respect to the remaining articles. So there are some parts of this, 4, 5, 10, 11, those are the money paragraphs. When those are implemented, that will help facilitate the other parts of the deal, is what they're saying. So as I've been saying, pay to play, that the Iranians are not going to do anything for free, that for the Iranians, this is all about money, and for Trump too, it's really all about money. And the final provision is that this agreement will be bound into international law by a binding resolution of the UN Security Council. Now, these 14 points are not confirmed, but it does match other reporting, Iranian reporting, and it matches J.D. Vance's description of the deal and others' description of the deal. Things could change in the next 4 days or so. Donald Trump could renege on the deal. There could be major catastrophic event in Lebanon that will cause the Iranians to back out, etc. So there's some things that could happen. Israel could do something. There could be a return to war immediately upon the signatures on this document. So there's no guarantees here, but it does appear that the U.S. is willing to offer major concessions to Iran, and the Iranians are not really doing that much. They're doing what they would have been willing to do on February 27, the day before the war started. And I talk about that in this following interview with NewsX.
What I want to first focus on is the reports that have been going around about the reparations that the United States will reportedly be paying Iran. Of course, Donald Trump has dismissed this. But this was a key point that the Iranians wanted. And of course, we haven't seen any confirmed framework of a deal yet. We haven't seen anything in writing, either from the Americans or from the Iranians officially. Why do you think we haven't seen that yet?
Well, I think there is some caution on the part of the Americans. They know that there are hardliners, that people inside the administration, as well as supporters of the administration, who will look at this deal, may react in a very negative way. But look, I'm going to say this, there is very little chance whatsoever that American taxpayers, American funds are going to be used for reconstruction. What they're talking about is either the unfreezing of Iranian funds that are held up in foreign bank accounts, up to $120 billion in frozen funds, or we're talking about sanctions relief. That means that companies and countries will be able to do business with Iran and buy Iran's oil and other petrochemical and mineral products. They've not been able to because of secondary sanctions imposed by the U.S. And what we can talk about possibly is a reconstruction fund that would be a mix of credits or grants, investments, and that's not going to come from the U.S. because of continuing sanctions. That's going to come from other countries, especially Gulf countries, that may or may not be interested in investing in Iran. It's not realistic to think that the United States is going to invest or give money to Iran. It's just not going to happen.
Mr. Daragahi, another key demand, of course, from the Iranians was the cessation of hostilities in Lebanon, and reports from the ground have indicated that we have seen a calming of that. However, given Benjamin Netanyahu's recent press conference claiming that Israel is not bound by any agreement that it itself has not signed, can hostilities come to a halt, or do you see that situation transpiring in a different direction?
Well, I think that Benjamin Netanyahu is in a tough position. This is the war he wanted, and he may have had a major role in starting the war, but he doesn't get to decide how it ends. It's Donald Trump that is ending the war. Meanwhile, he's in the political fight of his life. Everyone in the Israeli political sphere, from left to right to center, is attacking him for his perceived failures. If he were to just abide by what Donald Trump has requested and what this memorandum of understanding allegedly says and pull back from Lebanon, it would be the end of his political career. And that could mean that he's headed off to jail. Because there are so many people basically waiting for him to show a little bit of weakness, to go after him because of his just a gamut of corruption cases against him and his wife and his son. So, I mean, this guy is in deep trouble, and he may have to tone down operations in Lebanon just to keep the American president happy. But if he were to actually pull back, it would be a failure of such obvious and gargantuan proportions that it would mean basically the end of Benjamin Netanyahu.
It can't be going without mentioning that this, of course, is merely the start of a new round of negotiations, focusing on that key issue of nuclear enrichment inside Iran. Given how the current negotiations are going, and looking also at the previous instances of negotiations with Iran, which of course have ended or come to a disruption of the Americans bombing the Iranians. Are the Iranian demands going to be different? Are they going to be more inclined to make concessions or further demands? What more can you tell us?
I think that there is going to, I don't think there is going to be further demands. I think that Iranians are going to basically ask for what they've been asking for, an easing of sanctions, permission to basically sell the country's oil. And I think one important thing that is going to be there is the minimum enrichment. They want to have a civilian nuclear program. The Americans have long disputed that and said that you can't have a civilian nuclear program. If the Americans abide by that and let Iran have a minimal token program to enrich uranium, I think that there could be a deal had. And I think that one thing that's really important to mention is that Iran was willing to give a lot of concessions on February 27th before this war started. And they were at the negotiating table, and they were in a much weaker position. this war has been such a strategic failure for the United States and for Israel to some extent that now it's the Iranians that are basically in the driver's seat. And the negotiation now is about the Strait of Hormuz and how much money Iran is going to get. That is a catastrophic failure for the United States, and it shows just how badly this war went. I think that although the United States attacked Iran during 2 or 3 previous phases of negotiations, I don't think the Trump administration or any future U.S. administration is going to have the stomach for this, given the capability that Iran showed militarily and also just strategically in terms of closing off the Strait of Hormuz. I think that the talk of another huge war against Iran, there might be airstrikes here and there, is over for at least a generation. So coming up is my interview with Joost Hilterman of the Crisis Group about the damaging impact of the Israeli occupation on the economy of the West Bank. Joost Hilterman, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Borzo. It's a pleasure.
Okay, great. And as I was just mentioning, I've known you for more than 20 years, since those days in Baghdad in northern Iraq in the early 2000s. This is a really concerning report. I went through it, and the amount of research is obviously very impressive. It's something like 6 pages long, not like just some little report. It looks like the result of months and months of research. And I guess if you could just outline what is happening in general in a broad sense to the economy of the West Bank, and when it started, and if you could, I think let's just start with that.
So, well, first of all, thanks for having me on the program, Borzo. And it's yes, we go a long way back, and I really value these long-term relationships we have. So, yeah, the report, the Palestinian economy has become increasingly dependent on the Israeli one ever since the occupation started in 1967. And, there are many aspects to that. And with the Oslo Accords, there was an attempt to regulate that. But in some ways, it actually made the situation worse, because it essentially made the West Bank economy and the Gazan economy as well dependent on the Israeli currency, the shekel. And the Palestinian economy used to be, a long time ago, an agricultural economy. It never turned into an industrial one, but it became an import economy. And because it's an import economy, it's also totally dependent on Israel, because Israel controls the borders. It's that simple. Yeah. So the combination of being an import economy depending on Israeli control of the borders, plus the use of shekels for all transactions within the territory between the river and the sea, has made this economy increasingly dependent. But what has happened is that, first we had labor governments and others who may have had, and there were peace negotiations, and there was an attempt to come to a two-state solution. But the right wing that is in power, and has been in power now for some time in Israel, has a different agenda. It wants to annex the occupied territories, or at least the West Bank, and it has increasingly made the life of Palestinians very difficult. And then when this particular government came to power in December of 2022, that accelerated, and it accelerated even further after the Hamas attack on October 7th, 2023, because then this government, with this ideological agenda of settling the West Bank and essentially pushing or trying to push the Palestinian population out, imposed a number of both movement restrictions and financial restrictions that go way beyond anything that could be justified by security concerns.
I don't understand though. If I'm just being a little naive, the October 7th was because of Hamas in Gaza, and the West Bank is ruled by Fatah, which is a rival and, in some ways an enemy of Hamas. Why would that matter? Why would what happened in Gaza trigger what happened in the West Bank?
Well, because the war in Gaza after October 7th, the Israeli, attempt to suppress Hamas, provided space for the settler vanguard in the West Bank to press forward with that agenda of settling and eventually annexing the territory. So they've had free rein, essentially, also because the military, which could have put limits on what they did, was needed in Gaza and then in Lebanon. So actually, it's the settlers themselves who started to fill the ranks of the military in charge in the West Bank. So that agenda has moved forward.
Yeah, but it seems like there's two agendas, and we'll get to this a little bit. One is an agenda of increasing financial control over the West Bank by Israel. And then there's this more physical control. You talked about extensively about these checkpoints. There was a great anecdote in your research about this mayor or official in